What's up, humans? Welcome back to the Human Music Podcast. I'm Luke Rain, and this is episode 74, Don't Should on Yourself. What does should even mean? And what about supposed to? And how can that affect you as a creative? Today, we dive into intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation, the inner critic, comparison versus referencing, shoulds in mixing and vocals, and not letting others should on you either. The song of the week this week is by Seancy and yours truly, Luke Rain. It's called Storm Drain. There's a link for that down below. You can hear that playing behind me now. Also, please support our sponsors. They are dope resources that we use and that you can too to up your production game. Starting with Dojo TV. It's free. Producer live stream classes from the Producer Dojo Senseis, right? Then there's the weekly download where you can learn from Il Gates and his private weekly group lessons and get access to over 250 more episodes in the archive for just $20 a month. And then guest practices where you can learn from Seth Drake at the Approach Institute. He is the best engineer we know, and your first class over there is free. You can get more episodes, check out our socials, and get some free sound packs if you go over to thehumanmusicpodcast.com. Follow us on socials at The Human Music Podcast or at Human Music Pod on Twitter. And without further ado, let's get on into this episode, all right?
Hello, people of Earth. This is Tesco with Rip Kenny and Trap Jesus, and you're listening to the Human Music Podcast. Woo!
Human Music Podcast. I like it. What's up, humans? Welcome back to the Human Music Podcast. I'm Luke Rain. I'm here with Tesco.
Hey.
And of course, Rip Kenny.
What's Gucci?
Yeah. And
Everything's Gucci.
We're going to talk about a very important topic this week. Don't should on yourself.
Amen.
What the fuck does that mean? I want to ask you just like off top, just throwing it out there. What does that sound like to y'all? Don't should on yourself.
I mean, definitely sounds like you're fucking up, you know? Sounds like a situation you don't want to be in. It's never good to should yourself.
Yeah, you don't want to shit the bed or should your pants. It's not.
Yeah, I think the analogy is pretty congruent with what you kind of imagine when you hear that statement.
I don't know. Now that you said don't should your pants, I think maybe often you should wear pants. Especially, like going to restaurants,
that's
the
different.
bank,
No,
shit like that.
No, you interpolated that a different direction because don't should your pants means don't have a preconceived notion on what pants you should wear. Not should you wear pants. Don't should your pants.
I'm glad you explained that because I was clearly confused.
But that's the topic of the episode. Don't should yourself. Don't should on yourself. Don't should in your pants. Because shoulds just leave you feeling like you missed out or you made the wrong decision or you're inadequate and your pants are not the right ones. But, it's very possible every pair of pants in your closet could be the right ones.
Yeah.
Just don't should your pants.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, I love the analogy, Luke. And I think for everybody listening, go into the story of like, the meaning behind that funny statement. And
so I don't remember where I heard it first, tell you the truth. I think I must have been listening to a podcast or something and somebody said it and it just stuck. And then I started saying it, like I started using it a lot with students. He's like, like people like, should I make bass music or should I make house music? Like, hey man, don't should on yourself. Like, what do you feel like making? What turns out better? What what are you more called to? Like, it's not about a should. And to me, when I hear people say things like should, I ask like, what's a should? Supposed to. That's one that's kind of right next door to should. But who is doing this supposed supposing? I think we got to explore that first before we can understand this statement. who is doing this supposing and the supposed to, and who is saying that you should or should not do something? Because to me, it's like we are making an imaginary judgmental person outside of ourselves that we are afraid of displeasing with our decisions. And so shoulds seem like a fear-based question. Should I do this or should I do that? As opposed to just asking yourself, what do I want? What do I feel? You know, what excites me? What am I passionate about? All those are like love-based questions. They're, you know, checking in with your truth as opposed to checking in with an imaginary asshole who's going to sentence you to hard labor if you don't do the right thing.
Yeah.
And I mean, sorry, Evan, go for it.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, the should comes from like the imaginary group of arbiters of taste in your mind, right? Like people like, is this gonna be cool? Like, should I do this or should I do this? Because I want to get the maximum result from the unnamed group of people I'm assuming is gonna judge what I do, right? And it's like, just like you said, it comes from a place of weakness. It comes from a place of not having the confidence in your own like taste, really, your own decision making. Like, and let's clarify here, like asking your boss, should I get this report done? That's a little different. Like making music a creative pursuit, there's should is poison. In a engineering capacity, not music related, or math, or, you know, at your job, like should has a place, right? But in the capacity of a creative pursuit, there's should leads you down the wrong path, right? Because should is looking externally for approval, looking externally for the right decision, for the right choice, the right path to go down, when really any creative pursuit should be guided by what you think should be the answer, right?
Yes, so that's a
totally.
It's basically an extrinsic as opposed to an intrinsic motivation, based on what you just said there. And I like that you kind of mentioned, like, okay, maybe, you know, like in a math equation, should I do addition first or multiplication first in this algebra? Well, you should do the multiplication first, or you'll definitely get the wrong answer, because that's the order of operations in this very strict, non-creative area. Whereas, you know, like you said, creativity, music, there's not wrong answers, because sometimes people break the rules and get the happiest accidents. Exactly. I Googled it really quick. Just type should into Google. Of course, the dictionary definition pops up first. Definition 1, used to indicate obligation, duty, or correctness, typically when criticizing someone's actions.
Oh, wow.
Right? So it's that self-critic jumping in and mucking up all your creative juices. What snare should I use? Pick a snare, write a song. If you don't like how it sounds later, switch it.
Man, yeah, the inner critic is really like the biggest buzzkill, because I mean, by definition, right, it's criticism. It's like, it's not it's like kind of heavy, right? It takes out fun from the process. But the thing is, like, if you do something for a while and stop, you're not a quitter because of that. Like when people say don't quit, blah, 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 it doesn't mean don't literally give up anything that you try. There are definitely things that you should quit, but it just means in the greater pursuit of life, like, don't quit. And that's the thing with shoulds, is like, if something sparks your interest enough to try it, is never a waste of time to go down that route, because that initial gut feeling that made you go down that route, even if you can't appreciate the insight that you gain for it, you still like mature through that process. You gain certain insights, even if you're not aware of them, even if you were looking for different answers, just by going through that, yeah, you learn the truth, you know, like you guys said. It's like that really is life. That's the should aspect. Like, don't ponder it, go try it, see it as like a call to action, to experiment with it, you know. yeah, it's just the fear of the unknown. Really, it's just like too much pondering. It's that idea
Yeah.
of analysis by paralysis by analysis.
Yep.
Analysis paralysis. Yeah, it's
Yes.
like I feel like with music or anything creative, like I mean, like you have your own like critic inside your, like if you want to call it a critic, you have your own little voice inside your head, like dictating like what choices you're making, right? But it like if you're asking yourself like, should I use this snare? Like that, it's just not the right question. Like instead, just like replace it with, do I like this snare? Do I like this EQ move?
Yeah.
Do I like this preset?
Does it make me feel good about
Yeah.
it? Does
Should
this
you use it?
move
Who knows?
improve my experience of the snare?
Yeah.
Yeah. Alternatively, if you're going about it with like reference tracks and stuff, like why I've made all these choices that I like, but why isn't it sounding how I want? All these songs that you're referencing, probably all these artists you look up to, they're trying to follow, these kind of guidelines that modern music has brought within each of these like genres to kind of like fit within certain like fan bases and like with other artists and stuff like that. So that's another thing to consider too, like, learning what are the kind of standards for your genre, even if you deviate from it, just so you have kind of like a guideline, like, all right, this is, I don't know, let's say you make house, but you're trying to do your own version of it. Maybe you're trying to slow it down or speed it up or some shit. You still got to know like what the general guidelines are for the genre and know like, all right, for my style, I'm leaning a bit more bass heavy, so I'm going to do this, or, I'm leaning a bit heavier on this side, so I'm going to back off on this, or something like that, right? And you don't ever fully get to actualize that unless you try out all of the possibilities. That's why it's just exhausting to ponder on all of the shoulds, because until you not only try it, but you see the result of like trying to bring it to life in reality, you and by you I mean everybody, I think, always kind of underestimates the idea in the head versus like what comes out into reality, So all the shoulds are pretty worthless at the end of the day, because maybe that third idea that you thought was third best ends up being the one that works just because it's actually possible to execute it, and the two better ideas, it's just they don't translate.
Yes, dude, that one has been like a big part of my journey as a songwriter and producer, because maybe it wasn't exactly a should, but it was more of like a supposed to that I was putting on myself, because I had this sound in my brain and I wanted to put it into the DAW. And as I'm making it, it's like, that's not how it's supposed to sound. It's supposed to sound like that. But like you're saying, production isn't about what it's supposed to sound like as much as it's about what you can pull off well. What can you execute on? What is the sound that you can actually make? Like, if you're watching on YouTube, you can see Rip Kenny's cool mess of chords on his modular setup over there. If I was making a sound that I felt was supposed to sound like his modular gear, but I'm making it in my studio that has zero modular gear, that would be a real tough day for me. Whereas instead, I could open up a soft synth that I actually own and try to find or make the best sound that I can in there, and then write a song with it.
Dude, that's so funny you mentioned the modular, because actually Tesco and I were talking before the pod about the modular in general. And one of the things that I said was like, when I first got it, like I thought it was going to be like, I should use it as like a synth, right? And like, take the sounds from it and interchange them with, other sounds and use them to kind of like, checkerboard throughout. But what we were talking about is like, it's such, how on this podcast sometimes we mention like your color palette when you're working on a song, or like the film analogy, like a film is colored a certain way to emphasize like a palette of colors. Not every color in the rainbow is emphasized in like a blockbuster movie, right? Like, like a cartoon, there's like bright colors everywhere, but in a movie that has like a very set like vibe, like there's a set palette of colors that they're emphasizing and bringing forward. And the modular is like such like a different palette of colors. It's like using just like a completely different painting technique on an art piece. And so instead of thinking that I should use it like as a synth, like when I started just like having fun with it and then being like, oh yeah, I made that thing with this that would work here, or like, oh, I could do this with this, and like removing the like preconceived notion of like what I should use it for, and just like using it and having fun with it and being creative with it, and then like seeing where that leads. Like I was also telling him a perfect example of breaking the should do with it is I routed like a vocal tape out from my Apollo into one of the modules, like ran it through some different distortions and processing and stuff. And most of what I did was completely unusable, but there's like some little bits that like actually were cool. And it was just like I wonder if I could, and I like looked up on YouTube how to route externally from your audio interface into a modular, and of course there's a way to do it, but the process of doing that was like completely breaking out of that should. It's just like, just having fun and experimenting. I feel like could I is like a good substitute for should as well. Like could I do that? Like then it makes it more like playful and fun. Before I forget, I also wanted to mention, Tesco, you talked about, or at least mentioned, reference tracks in relation to the shoulds of music. And that's like extremely relevant to me because just the other day I was figuring out what reference tracks I wanted to use to mix and master the album. And I was like trying to find songs that like sounded like what a finished song of what I want to make is. And I realized that like there's just not a whole lot of music that like contextually fits like all of the pieces of what I'm doing. So I'm like, why am I trying to find a song or songs that fit like all the parts of what I'm doing, when every time that you try and just like blindly match every part of your mix to a reference anyways, like it's just not going to be the same. Like you didn't start with the same stuff. You didn't make the same moves along the way. So when you get to the end and try and shoehorn your setup into sounding exactly like a reference, it's just destined to fail. And what I realized, and what everyone at home listening can take from this, is instead of finding a reference that I could match everything in the song to, I was like, okay, well, I know this song is like the limit of how loud a sub can be. Like it's almost annoying when you play it in your car, but it's just like it's right at the limit. Like it's so loud. I'm like, okay, so like I'm going to use this track as like, if my sub is louder than this, it's too loud. And I know that for a fact. Like that's a really great reference. Like I need that. Like another one is like, for the guitars, like, a guitar sound that like I really enjoy and would aspire to. Another one is like how like complex sounds done like in a clean fashion. So like, okay, so if I have like a really complex sounding part, like this would be a good like style to get to. Like if I could get it to sound nearly as clean as this, or like a big thick drop of I ended up using like 7 different reference tracks in this little bundle that I'm going to end up loading into like every song. But all of them have like a specific thing. Like this is a bunch of sounds that stack together, sound huge, but is still clean. Like most of the time I'm not going to get it as clean as this reference, but I can try and massage it towards like, this is a good, point of reference here, obviously. And having a bunch of like limits rather than it should sound like, it makes it so like, I'm not as like worried, like existentially worried about making it sound as good as this Noisia track. I'm just like, is the main bass sound like nearly as clean as this? Yeah. great. Is the sub loud enough? Is it not too loud? You know, like having the limits and then being like, just get it as good as you can within those limits. Then you're just setting yourself up for way more success and way less hair pulling out, because every time that you try and match something perfectly to something else, you end up going too far and then taking it off. And then 10 versions later, you're like, fuck, I just ruined this song. I got to go back like
Yep.
3 days of work.
Yeah,
So.
it's such a good point. And I've heard multiple like dope engineers give that advice as well, like whether personally to me or like in general on a YouTube video. I've heard like you're never going to find the track that has all the type of elements, and unless you're making extremely derivative music, right?
Yeah.
If you're doing anything original-ish, there's going to be no one sound that has all the pieces. So instead, just like you're doing, pick a group of songs that have certain things about them that you're checking for. Just like you said, like, this is my track I'm going to check the subs off of on all my songs, and this is the one I'm going to check the highs off of because I really like the texture, and this is the one I'm checking the vocals because I love the way these vocals are mixed, and that's close to my sound. And if I can put them in the same ballpark, like you're saying, also like getting things in the ballpark so that they're relatively close, so that if you mix one track into another, it's not like, whoa, the track on that, pro track that, like you said, Noisia or whatever, like the vocal in the intro of the Noisia track sounded so good, and then mine sounds like small and thin and dry. It's like, oh yeah, like having that group, which is why I don't know if you have it, but I use metric AB for referencing.
Dude, I have that, but I haven't dove into like
it's super simple to use. The good part about it is you can load up to 16 tracks, and then they're just a button, and so you can just like click between the different tracks, and then there's one big button that's just the AB button, and so you can just like, your track is A, and then you can switch between B's, and then it also has like filters and meters, so you can check, phase correlation, and you can check loudness, and you can check the spectrum and all sorts of stuff. And you can like set cue points and loop points on the reference tracks and stuff. I would recommend getting into it, because you'll like look at it for like 10 seconds and be like, oh, I completely understand how to use this tool.
Yeah, that's actually, I'm so glad that you mentioned that, because I bought it a while ago because Bathymetrics was like, yeah, dude, shout out Bathymetrics. She was so in love with its use case and like how well it worked, and it was on sale, and I was like, yeah, I'll get it for $50. And then I like forgot it existed, and now this is a really good reminder.
Hey, perfect timing. Synchronicity. Yeah. Yay.
Yay.
You should use it. Ha ha ha.
Yeah, you don't need to all the time. It's like that's the thing with the plugin like that, is you primarily use it when you're wrapping up a song. And I think your blind spots are always going to be the parts that you overlook because you're like, oh yeah, I know that already. Right? So just recognizing that, like, in pursuit of writing the song, in generating all of these parts, in arranging the song, blah, 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 all of these things kind of, like, these details get lost in the tunnel vision of you trying to complete the song. So it's good to just have these references handy to just check your work to something that, maybe to a couple songs that have qualities that you consider better executed than in your own song, and the thing is, better is objective. So again, comes down to your taste. But if you could take a little bit of sauce from here, a little bit of sauce from there, then, you could just provide a bit more dimension to what you're trying to express as far as your ideas, and pay homage to your influences. All that just makes for a bit more interesting music,
Yeah. And, this whole thing really ties into the concept of the episode for me, because it's like, my song should sound like Excision is a rough place to live, because Excision makes some of the technically like cleanest, loudest shit in the entire world.
Right?
Dude, I saw him play 3 times the other week at Bass Canyon. I can tell you that shit sounded incredible. And I would like to continue to work on my engineering and my sound selection and sound design and things so I can get closer to that. But my music shouldn't sound like Excision because he's already killing that lane. My music should sound like me, and I can aspire to make parts of my soundscape closer to what I like about that sound.
Yeah.
So one thing I've been thinking about a lot, because when you look at artists like that, you compare yourself to those artists, even maybe if it's not how you want to sound, maybe mix down wise, right? You look at a Excision or a Virtual Riot or a person that's like top of the game in their genre, and you're like, man, that's like the bar to strive for. That's like, as far as quality, typically what you want to emulate, right? You want each song to have the quality of the major artist, regardless of, whether you're underground or whatever. So it's like, how many people do you think are on Excision's team? Right? Like, let 10, I'd say that's pretty reasonable, but let's just say 5. Could you do the work of 5 people? Hell no. Nah.
5 really lazy people? Maybe.
Yeah. But let's say 5 yous, right? Like somebody in that situation is going to be somebody that's like passionate, driven, blah, blah, blah. So you get a team of people working, you're comparing your work against theirs. You're always going to feel let down. So, I always encourage people to focus on your strengths, because really, like, your solo work, if you're the type you want to do everything solo, fine, all the more power to you. But I think really the best music is written when you have multiple like influences and opinions on it. And so, coming from that side, it's just it makes for a better product in the end when you can get multiple people in a room. And so like your solo work is kind of like your portfolio for what you like to hear in music and what you're capable of pulling off. But the real magic really happens when you combine your strengths with somebody else's, and then get a team of 20 people. I from what I've heard, he who shall not be named had like 20 people working under him, and that was like a cult-like following that's like as top tier as it gets within EDM, right? So I've definitely, like, in the early days, used a bunch of his references. Be like, man, why doesn't my shit slap like this? Why is my sound design not cool enough? How is this just so intricate? How does everything fit together so perfectly? And it's like, man, there's one person on the team that really excels at arrangement and can really point out the fine details of why an arrangement doesn't work. There's another person on the team that really fine tunes the sound design, and I'm sure everybody on that team is competent at all aspects of it. But when you get everybody's strengths aligned, that's when you make the truly magic shit. And that's like, I found for me anyway, took a lot of pressure off of trying to make the perfect thing always. Cause I'm like, man, the end goal is to write something truly incredible. And if that takes multiple people, then all of my solo stuff is just an expression of what I'm capable of, a resume, if you will,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. That's helped me a lot with the shoulds, because I just try to do what I'm capable of,
and then push that limit little by little. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. This whole referencing discussion really makes me think of the dope phrase, comparison is the thief of joy. Whoever said that, I'm sure I could quickly Google it, but
shout out them.
Yeah, shout out to but yeah, like, because referencing is just that. Like, all right, what do songs I like sound like? Remind my ears so I can make better mixing decisions. As opposed to comparison. Oh, why don't I sound like Bass Voldemort yet? Why don't I sound like Excision yet? Why don't I sound like, why can't I sing like Justin Bieber yet? Yeah, I said that the other day. Somebody had no idea who I was talking about.
Not gonna lie, it took like 2 seconds when that shit hit.
I mean, you just said he who should not be named.
I mean, yeah.
Should.
Just caught me off guard for a second.
This shit is like baked into our fucking vocabulary, though, right? Like,
it is. It really is.
Somebody could make the argument against us. Oh, you're just talking semantics. It's just word choice. But fuck that. Words are magic. Your words define your thoughts and beliefs, which define your self-limiting beliefs, your actions, your fears, your willingness to try shit, your willingness to make mistakes. Like, all of that is affected by the words you choose to use. So like, if you notice yourself saying speech patterns that aren't serving you and aren't uplifting you and might actually be directly holding you back, it is your responsibility to break those speech habits and replace them with better ones, which actually reminds me of a phrase I heard recently that I really liked. Somebody at this camp out this weekend I was at said, like, we all talk about like falling into our habits and falling into bad patterns. But, I wanted to flip that. Instead of falling into my bad habits, I'm rising into my new habits, my new good habits that I'm replacing them with. I was like, yeah. So like, a lot of what we've been talking about is like rising into better ways to speak of and conceptualize what we're going for that are healthier for our creative mental health.
Yeah. And like, just like you fall into a bad habit, why couldn't you just fall out of that bad habit just as easily? And like,
I mean, yeah.
well, it's like, it's basically just reframing the problem in two different directions, right? It's like either flipping it on its head directly or reframing it with different words to make it more beneficial. It's doing the same thing, right?
Yeah.
Just as like the word should in this whole conversation, don't should on yourself, is like just a catchy vessel, like word conduit to explain the concept of what we're talking about, which is don't look externally for approval on your decisions, right? Like the whole preface of this conversation was diving into the what we're talking about, and really ultimately the word is just the convenient mechanism to explain the concept, right?
Yeah, amen to that. Yeah. So I was curious. We've covered like not shoulding on yourself, but like, are there any times where you guys like specifically remember shoulding on yourself and like having it derail you?
My whole music career.
So many times.
I mean,
dude, every day.
Yeah, I mean, I started off producing metal, went into electronic music, now doing more vocal music. I felt like there were definitely a lot of times where I felt like there was something I wanted to learn, but I would be starting from scratch and felt some type of resistance or like, oh, I can't do that or whatever. Like the biggest one for me was I'm not a vocalist, and it's just kind of been clicking, like, especially like the last like couple months, like it doesn't fucking matter. Like that whole I'm not a vocalist thing, it doesn't fucking matter. I'm just
another limiting self-belief
and processing them and getting along with my day just like I was before. And there were definitely a lot of times where I was like, man, should I have fell more in line with what I was originally doing? Should I have kept along that path? What about compound interest? Blah, 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 all building together. Maybe I could have made it by now. Maybe this, maybe that. Like should have done this, should have done that type thing. And, now when I look at where I'm at, I feel like I have a unique sound that I'm very happy with. Skill-wise, I feel like I can express everything I want to. I mean, as far as like the clout metrics and stuff, I mean, that's never really what it was about anyway. But as far as making a career and all that, everything feels a lot more sustainable. I feel like all of the roundabouts I've taken have brought me to a unique place where now I'm in my own lane to make this shit happen. I feel like there's not really competition because the thing is, there's like multiple points of connection now with artists. Like I can work with bass music artists. I could talk to people that do metal. I could talk to people that have gone into hip hop or electronic music from metal. I could talk to people that have gone into metal from those genres. I could work with anybody and I can connect deeply with people, obviously, because music is like such a good connector. And when I look at some of those benefits that I never like, consider in those moments where I'm very like analytical of like, where could I have been or whatever, like, I feel like I'm in a much stronger position now, so I don't really have those thoughts anymore. But I definitely
did let that like enter my mental frame before, you know, and I don't think that any of those concerns were necessarily true.
Mm-hmm.
Like I feel like it's a positive, if anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Amen.
it's like, it's not like you woke up one day and like didn't should anymore. You know, it's like, it's a
I should
slow
every morning.
incremental process of getting better, trusting your ear, you know, which then as you get better reinforces your own taste and decision making. So you're not like, should, like I said earlier, like should comes from a place of weakness, right? And as you build your skills, build your ear, build your engineering talents, like all of those shoulds just go away because you're like, no, I know this sounds good, or I'm, you know, I'm confident in what I'm doing enough to not look like, what should this sound like? You know, I'm like, oh, I like how this sounds. I'm moving with it, you know. But that's, you know, it's a long, arduous grind, just like learning the skills of music production to get to a point where you're confident in the decisions you make. And there have been so many times where, you know, you're sitting there like, oh man, like the Excision example you used is so funny, because when I was like, you know, 1-2 years into production, I was like, I don't think I will ever make sounds that are even half as cool as the ones Excision are making. You know, just like you said, just like so clean and so loud. And, you know, I still don't think I could make the level of Excision sounds that he makes for his music. But luckily, I stopped thinking about what he was doing and was just like, what do I like? And so now I don't have to think about what he's doing. I just do what I what I like. You know, I'm not sitting there like, oh, did I finally make the sound that's as clean and big as Excision's? Like, no, I'm just like,
Yeah, that's the thing, is he can't do what you can do either, and he can't do what I'm doing. He can't do
right,
what Luke is doing.
yeah,
Amen.
exactly.
You know,
And he's not worried about it either.
yeah,
No,
he's living life.
Amen. Yeah, I feel you. I've done a lot of shitting on myself over the years, for fucking sure. You know, like I remember like one really early on in my music career, you know, starting to learn how to be a vocalist, learn how to get on a mic and rap. And you know, I was like, you know, 17 years old, you know, like skinny little kid, you know, like, and I'm like, oh, my voice should be deeper. And so I'm going to try and like rap on a mic. And then I like listened back to it and it was like, oh, that is god awful. I sound so fake. I don't sound like I have a deep voice. I sound like I'm faking like I have a deep voice, because that's exactly what's happening. And I'm sitting here like trying to be Scarface or something, when it's like, and then I like remember like, wait, like Q-Tip exists also. And Q-Tip has this high voice. It's such a vibrant thing. He's like up there. And it's like, oh, right. There's like this big range of human voices. And it's not about what a rapper is supposed to sound like. It's about what does this person's voice sound like, and how can this person learn to use their voice to its highest potential. Like that's usually comes from, you know, learning, just like learning breath control and shit. And then developing, recording a bunch, listening back and trying little variations around the sweet spot until you get that spot that's both natural and dope sounding. And I bet you guys have both experienced a lot of that recording vocals.
100%. Everything is about the variation. Same with sound design stuff. Like if you like to make drops and that kind of stuff, everything comes down to opening yourself up to as many high quality variations. You can get a bunch of like glitchy sounding garbage, right? But like if you have 50 good variations that work, that you've just mud pied, and now, you know, I love Ableton for the take lanes. You can just like punch in those takes really easily.
Yeah.
You know,
comping is
like
such
that.
a huge thing for that.
Huge, man. Because again, like to bring it back to what we're talking about, like it's such an obvious thing when you state it so bluntly, but like really what we're doing in production is we're taking everything that is not everything that should, everything that is, and we're arranging it in a way to sound pleasant. So to get more of what is, you need to just create more variations, more takes, more recordings, more mud pies, whatever. You need more to select from, because it doesn't help you at all that the is that you have, the take that you have is ass, and it should be like this, but it's not. It just doesn't magically do that because it should. You need a is that is that.
Yes.
You know?
The isness of the is needs to
Create
is.
more ises. Don't be pondering, just create more ises and select from your ises.
Yeah. Yeah, take the best ones.
It's so true.
Yeah.
Like, I swear to God, when I'm recording vocals, for every take that I love, there's probably 49, 49, like
49,000.
legitimately 1 out of 50 is like, wow, I really like that. And probably 30 of those are like, no. And 10 of those are like, that's not really good. And then like 5 are maybe, and then the other 4 out of the 50 are like, this could work, but I'm gonna need to massage it. And then there's 1 that's like, yeah, that's great, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But like, that's the thing about doing it yourself, is it's not like there's no limit on how many tries you get, right? You don't run out of lives. Like, there, like literally every song on the album that I'm working on, that's like, okay, well, I don't like this phrase in this song. Like, today I'm going to take 2 hours and sing that phrase another 100 times. And then 2 of those will be great. And I'll use those. You know, it's not, when you stop like worrying about like, if you can, or what, like, just keep doing it until you can. It's like, that's the beautiful part about electronic music. It's not, you don't have to pay to go rent out some expensive studio down the street, and you only got 2 hours, and hopefully you weren't at a club yelling last night, because then your voice is fried and you can't do it. Like, it's just open it up the next day and like try it again, you know?
Yeah, and a lot of like what you end up with comes through all of the different variations. And like you said, there's like different tiers to it, where you're like, this is garbage, this is like okay, but that doesn't fit, this is like more in line, this is perfect. To me, like, all of those samples that you don't use are helping define what you're looking for through what you don't like. So typically, as you listen through, you might have an idea of what the final sample sounds like, but again, reality dictates what ends up in the final song. So as you listen through and you're finding the part that fits, you might not know exactly how it needs to, like, all the nuances of how it's going to fit. But as you listen through the 49 versions, you're like, nah, this one's too harsh. Nah, this one goes down in pitch too much. Nah, this one is too high pitched. Nah, this one is this. Nah, this one is this. This sucks for this reason. This sucks for that reason. Blah, blah, blah. So you're at least narrowing it down from the perspective of, I need a sound that doesn't have these 49 qualities, and that'll suffice. You know, like,
Yeah.
It doesn't even need to be perfect. It just needs to not have these other 49 qualities, and anything within that subset will work.
Amen. And I kind of want to redirect a little bit to another thing that's popped in my mind, to when other people try to should on your music and should on you. Like, you know, there's obviously there's like mentorship, you know, having people that you trust to run your music by and get their thoughts and get their take on it, and then what they would do in your shoes. But, you know, a good mentor, you know, will say, you know, if this is my tune, what I would do is I would, you know, delete the pad in the background, and I would turn the snare up, and, you know, blah, 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 or whatever, right? Or maybe I would rearrange it like that. But they're not saying like, you have to do this, you know, because it's your creativity, and they understand that. And maybe their creativity and your creativity are completely different, because they are, you know. But then you ever have like a friend or somebody be like, oh, you know, you should make a song that's like blah, blah,
All the time.
or you should make a song with this, goofy thing in it or that kind of instrument. And it's like, maybe you should go buy Ableton
Yeah,
and
you
spend the
should do
next
that.
10 years of your life hating yourself and shitting on
You
yourself
should
till you realize
should
you shouldn't.
yourself, actually.
Yeah. Go should yourself. No, it's funny because like you're exactly right. And I feel like different people at different stages in their production journey are looking for different feedback, right? Like when you don't 100% know what you're doing, you actually probably do want someone to tell you what you should do with this thing to make it better because you don't know, right? But like you get to a certain point where the feedback that you're looking for is not what you should do, but what they felt about it. You know, like I felt like that second drop just didn't have the same power and impact as the first one. Great. Now I can determine what I should do to, you know, to fix that if I deem it, you know, credible feedback. Now I can figure out what I should do to try and massage it in that direction, right? Or what I could do to potentially, you know, improve the song in that aspect, right? Like, you know, your arrangement felt like it dragged on too long. Like that's helpful feedback because you're not like you should cut out the first half of the intro because then you're like, but I like that first part, and maybe you're like, oh, I could just make the build up like a quarter as long. That's fine. You're what you ultimately decide to do as you get better is guided by a looser framework of feedback. At least for me, that's what I've found helpful. And it's interesting because you can't always direct someone to give you feedback like that, which is why you need to improve basically your feedback filtering skills. Like and a lot of times someone will tell you something about the song and they don't mean exactly what they say, you know, like oftentimes you'll have like a uninformed ear, you know, in the production space say like, you know, I didn't like this section doesn't work, or I didn't like this, or like that sound is annoying. It's like, well, what is annoying about that sound to them? It could be because the sound is harsh. It could be because the sound sounds like a car alarm. It could be the rhythm of the sound. If something's annoying to that person, and they're not saying like necessarily don't use it, but you should think about what they were, you know, what the feeling behind that is, and then try and get that. I've realized, at least for me, when I get feedback from like, you know, like my closest friends or my girl, it's like a lot of the times I will try and before I started to improve my feedback filter, I would try and like take literally what they meant. But if they're not sitting here in the DAW, like they can't give you such a detailed, informed critique on that part, right? So you have to like think about the person and like what their taste is and what they like and what they probably didn't like about that. And then 9 times out of 10, I'll like I won't even touch the thing that they said they didn't like or was annoying or didn't work or whatever, and just like continue making the song. And then it'll get to the stage where I feel like the song is done. And they're like, oh my God, you made that thing so much better. I'm like,
thanks.
I didn't.
Yep.
I literally, you know, you low passed it or something like that. And then like to them, the impression was that the thing they didn't like about it was fixed. But it's such a subjective thing. So don't always take every word that someone gives you for feedback at face value. You gotta really think about the context.
Yeah, saying this sound is annoying. It's like maybe your track's a rhythm tune and they think rhythm is annoying. Or maybe they like acoustic instruments and not synths, or vice versa. Or maybe, you know, there might be a whole host of things. Plus, especially with, you know, somebody who doesn't have the vocabulary of production and engineering, you know, they're just gonna be like, yeah, that thing is like, I don't like it. As opposed to, you know, that layer that you have on top of the sub is a little bit harsh in this frequency range. You know, like the source of that critique is definitely very important. And I love that you talked about the feedback filter, because that's extremely important. And understanding where like say in a situation where you are getting really informed feedback from a knowledgeable mentor, filtering which parts of this are technical feedback and which parts are like artistic feedback. Because, you know, like you can take or leave any part of either of them, but like the technical feedback being like, oh, I'm hearing harshness around 3K is a lot different than I think your buildup is too long. Because maybe all their music and the shit they spin is all 16 bar intros, and your shit that you like listening to and love is all 32 bar intros, and there's an audience for both.
Yeah.
100%.
So,
yeah.
Yeah, one last kind of analogy is like rough analogy is like I kind of view it like the stock market, where it's like you can have all these things like fundamentals and patterns and blah blah blah, which is kind of like the established theory and blah blah blah. But you know, it's like all this stuff that's kind of been proven to work theoretically. There's logic and reasoning behind why these things work. But at the end of the day, you know, like who saw GameStop coming, for example? I think of that in the same sense as like who knows what the next trend song-wise will be. But
can you imagine what people told 100 Gex what they should change about their music?
And that's the thing, is like 100 Gex is the GameStop, because it's like if you were going to place your bets on something, you wouldn't trade on 100 Gex theoretically by market fundamentals or by music theory fundamentals, whatever.
That's true.
It's like that wouldn't be a safe bet for you to put money on. But if you did and it took off, nobody would have seen that coming. It goes against all fundamentals, but it just has that like X factor to it that you just can't quite put your finger on by those fundamentals.
Dude, what you're saying is literally like the most perfect culmination of like all of what we've been talking about. It's like the X factor is the reason shoulds don't exist.
Mm-hmm.
It's literally like the one thing that without a shadow of a doubt disproves the hypothesis that you should do it a certain way ever, is that like the weirdest stuff that pops off and changes the game and is the most influential and is the most successful is the stuff that probably got 100 no's because it should do something else before it actually made it into the world and people were like, this is cool.
Yes.
Not
Amen.
to cut you
Always
off.
Easier said than done. That's just human nature. That's just what the world is. So just do more. Put all that energy you would have spent pondering into just trying out more possibilities and pick your favorite and then get on with your fucking life. Go start the next project or something.
Yeah, that's what you should do.
Yeah, what you shouldn't do is should your pants every morning.
Yeah, don't should the bed. It's weird.
Well,
on that note, Jinx. Yeah, that's a good bow on it. Peace, humans. And peace among worlds. Ha 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 ha.
Ha ha.
Ha ha.
Ha.
Ooh wee.
Aw.
Oh.
All right, humans. Thank you so much for being here with us again. Once again, I'm Luke Rain. You can follow me at Luke Rain Music. You can follow my co-hosts Rip Kinney at Rip Kinney Music and Tesco at I Am Tesco. And follow the pod. That's at The Human Music Podcast or at Human Music Pod on Twitter. Plus, we just got a TikTok, so follow us over there. And then make sure you go check out my song of the week. This is by me and the homie Seancy. It's called Storm Drain. Really popular. Trying to push that past 10K on Spotify. If you go listen, that's what's playing behind me now. And then, of course, support our sponsors. Dojo TV. Free produced live stream classes from the Producer Dojo Senseis themselves. Then the weekly download where you can learn from Il Gates and his private weekly group lessons and get access to over 250 more episodes in the archive for just $20 a month. and guest practices where you can learn from Seth Drake, the best engineer we know over there at the Approach Institute. And with guest practices, your first class is free. All right, humans, till next week, peace and peace among worlds.
I like it.